and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Zara Seidler.
I'm Billi FitzSimons.
Yesterday, the Washington Post announced it would cut a third of its workforce in one of the most significant restructures in the newspaper's history. The cuts will eliminate entire departments, including sports and book coverage, and drastically reduce international reporting. Today, Billi, we are peeling back that fourth wall and unpacking what's happened, why one of the US's most storied newspapers is in this position, what it means more generally for journalism.
Zara, whenever there's a big media story like this, we always have a conversation about whether the audience will care, because obviously we care because
care deeply.
Our entire life is working in the media and we care about the future of journalism, not just in Australia, but worldwide.
Yeah.
And so we're always interested in, does the audience actually care?
Yeah.
And I think we should tell them why they should care in this podcast. And so
I was going to say, they can make their own deduction at the end of this if we've done a good enough job of making them care.
But so I think we go through what happened with Washington Post. And then I also think it's an interesting discussion to think about how the Daily Aus is thinking about the future of journalism.
Yeah, I love it.
First, let's get to the Washington Post. For anyone who's maybe not super familiar with it, do you want to just go through what the Washington Post is known for?
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's known for its journalism in the first instance. So it's a very old media company. No TDA vibes there. It was established in 1877. And it's become one of the most influential newspapers in the world. Its most famous reporting is probably Watergate. So that was the scandal that Washington Post reporters uncovered about a break-in at the Democratic National Headquarters. It eventually led to the resignation of US President Richard Nixon. Huge story. One of, the biggest example of the type of journalism that the Washington Post has traditionally done. The paper was owned by the same family for 4 generations. So it really was this family-owned dynasty, I'd say. There's a very good movie about it. You haven't watched it. I asked.
I have not watched it.
And judged you greatly.
Honestly fair.
So watch The Post with Meryl Streep. Great movie. But it was eventually sold to Jeff Bezos, who I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with. He's the Amazon founder. He's a billionaire. He bought the Washington Post for $250 million US in 2013, which is actually a lot earlier than I thought it was. For some reason, it feels like a fairly recent thing, but I was at school, so it wasn't recent. And he has owned and run that since that time.
And why did he want to buy the Washington Post?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of interviews that have been done with Bezos to try and get to the bottom of this. I'd say the clearest explanation that's been given is that the Washington Post was in a fair bit of financial ruin before it was sold, and it was looking for somebody to turn that around. And Jeff Bezos was approached as somebody who, given his experience, obviously creating Amazon and everything else that he's done, could potentially have turned that around. In the interviews I've watched, he said, I wasn't looking to buy a media company. They approached me and I thought that I could do something. He was optimistic about that. He also has identified the impact on democracy, that having a media company that is sustainable and flourishing, that can have a really positive impact for society. So those are the kind of reasons that he cited.
And so then how has the paper performed since then?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we kind of know the answer
spoiler,
now.
It's not going great right now.
But has it always gone badly
No.
since the moment he bought it?
No, it hasn't. So it actually thrived at first. Around the 2016-2017 mark, so the first Trump presidency, the Washington Post really was doing very well. It turned over a profit in those years, and that for a media company is significant. But more than that, I think its journalistic integrity was really growing during that time. So that's when it came up with the motto, "Democracy dies in darkness."
I really like the alliteration of that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure
Democracy,
everyone's thought
darkness.
about that except me, but yes, it does. And that sits under the Washington Post, what do you call that, name
Yep.
every day, both in the print and the online. So that slogan has really reinvigorated its editorial integrity. And during the time of the first Trump presidency, there was a lot of pressure on the Washington Post by the Trump administration. But during that presidency, Bezos really backed the Post's editorial coverage, and they went, I would say, quite hard on the Trump administration at that time.
Okay, so it was going really well, and then clearly at some point that stopped.
Yeah.
What was the point in which it started going in a different direction?
Yeah, well, I think what a lot of US outlets found was that after the Trump presidency, or let's take it back one step, during the Trump presidency, a lot of outlets had a lot of eyeballs for the first time. There were people who were hungry for this very different type of president who was engaging with the media in a very different way. And I remember back then, like, you just wanted to read everything there was to read because it was so new to us all. And media really flourished as a result of that. Then when Trump left the Oval Office, news media really felt that.
But then we had the pandemic.
Yes.
And
there was an artificial spike.
Yes.
Yeah.
But people, again, were wanting to read everything.
100%.
And that was also, it sounds weird to say, but that was really good
for news.
Yeah. And newsrooms and the success of newsrooms, including the Daily Aus.
It was. Yeah, I mean,
it's a weird thing to say or to acknowledge because it was such a dark time for so many people, but for the tech industry and then also for newsrooms, it was a positive, I guess, artificial spike.
The thing that we speak about that a lot of traditional newsrooms say, if it bleeds, it leads. So really dark stories, really bad stories, they tend to do, I want to say well in inverted commas. You can't see me doing that because this is a podcast, but they do well. And COVID is a time where you're right, like it was such a dark time for everybody, but there was this hunger for news, this hunger for information, and people really turned to news.
And just to say, the Daily Aus tries to actively go against that, I guess, well-known idea in media that if it bleeds, it leads, because that doesn't create a very positive newsroom or a very positive publication.
No, which is why we have a good newsletter, which you can subscribe to that goes out on a Sunday.
But back to the Post.
Yes.
So after the pandemic and after Trump is gone, what happens?
It goes downhill financially pretty quickly. And so in 2023, it's probably the first key time that we understand that it's not going well. At that point, there are voluntary buyouts which are offered to staff. So that's basically you can choose to leave and you get a financial incentive to leave. And that was to avoid mass layoffs. And then from there, it never really improves. And it's then in 2024 and onwards that these kind of ideological tensions also start to emerge.
What do you mean by ideological tensions?
I actually think we might have done a podcast on this, but in 2024 in October, the Washington Post announced it wasn't endorsing a candidate for the presidential election.
Yes, we did talk about this
Yeah,
on the podcast.
and so it was announced that they weren't going to endorse anyone. It was very widely known that it was meant to be, that it was written up to be Kamala Harris, and that it got pulled at the last minute. And then a decision was made that for the first time in the Post's history, they weren't endorsing a candidate. Critics of Jeff Bezos said that that was a capitulation to Donald Trump by Jeff Bezos, who has a relationship with the president. But it also then, from a newsroom point of view, led to a lot of resignations and a lot of unrest about what that relationship between the billionaire founder and the president was looking like. And then in February last year, Bezos announced that the paper's opinion section would be restructured, and I'm reading here, to focus only on personal liberties and free markets. And he said that it would exclude opposing viewpoints to those two ideas. And so opinion pages have long been a place where you can publish all sorts of opinions of all sorts of topics, but they were really, I'd say, streamlined to just be about these two things. And the Post decided they were no longer publishing differing opinions outside of those two ideas.
So those two ideas are personal liberties and free markets.
Yeah. Let me uncode that.
Yeah, do you want to uncode that?
People or critics of that decision said that that was a decision that they wouldn't publish left-leaning or progressive opinion pieces as they typically had in the past.
Okay, Zara, so let's move to what happened yesterday. There were mass layoffs. This was widely speculated for a number of months now that it would happen. It finally did happen.
Yeah.
But I think it was even more layoffs than most were expecting.
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video. Yeah, it was. So we had a third of the Washington Post newsroom laid off in this latest cut. That's more than 300 people. And it was from across the business. So what we do know, and at the time of recording, we haven't actually had a formal statement from the Post or from Jeff Bezos. So we are relying on a lot of internal sources leaking what was said. What we do know is that the entire sports section of the Washington Post was shut down, and we knew that was coming, or we thought that was coming, because the team that was being sent to the Winter Olympics got told a few weeks ago that they weren't going anymore. So that was expected. The books section has been completely closed. The daily podcast has ended.
I didn't realize that.
Yep, done. It's called Post Reports. It's no longer.
Wow.
International teams have been drastically cut. So the paper's entire Middle East desk has been let go. Obviously, we know there is a lot of news from that region right now. So I thought that was a particularly interesting decision. The Ukraine bureau chief, who was in a war zone at the time, was let go as well. The Metro team, which covers local news, was reduced. And interestingly, the newsroom's Amazon reporter was let go of.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an interesting
I just saw that all over
tidbit.
Twitter. Yeah. She then published quite a lengthy statement about what she believed that meant about the paper's editorial independence.
I didn't even know that they had a specific reporter just for Amazon. So
Doesn't
that's
that make
interesting.
Doesn't that make you realize, how small our newsroom is?
Yes.
We have journalists who cover every single topic.
Yes. Yes, including us.
One company being your entire beat is wow.
And so what reason did they give for these layoffs?
Again, all we can go off is reporting, but according to NPR, the paper said that it needed a strategic reset in the era of artificial intelligence. And it also said that platforms like Google, which once helped the Post thrive, are in serious decline. And I want to just unpack that for a second, because this might be a really nerdy thing that most people don't care about, but indulge me.
No, we love nerdy things.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to do it then. So typically in the past, if you had a question, say, about rising interest rates, you would type into Google, what are interest rates, or what is the cash rate? You would then have options about what website you could click on, whether that be the Daily Aus or whether that be the Washington Post or whatever it is. Nowadays, Google search has an AI overview. And what that has meant is that most people are no longer going past that AI overview to the actual website. So news outlets that rely on click traffic, like the Washington Post and other legacy media outlets, have seen something like an 80 to 90% drop off of traffic. And that is killing a lot of newsrooms. And that is one of the reasons that they cited as to why they needed to lay off so many people.
Can I say something about how the Daily Aus is thinking about that?
Yeah.
So before Google revealed this new AI overview, we had a whole website strategy that we spent a lot of time working
time, I'd
on.
say, in retrospect.
And then literally within a month or two of us launching that new website, Google published this new AI overview.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, there goes our website
Never getting
strategy.
that time back. No, I mean, it's so interesting.
And we've had to pivot.
Yeah, it shows how nimble and agile you need to be to work in this industry, or to run a company in this industry, because it changes every day. And like the way that we consume information changes. If you had told me 2 years ago that I wasn't going to be clicking on websites because I'd be reading AI overviews, I would have told you were crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what it is.
And it is easier for us as a smaller media company to very quickly make those changes to our strategy. But for a company with thousands of employees, you can understand why it is harder to keep up with the pace of change in the landscape.
100%.
And I guess just sticking on that and how it is harder for larger media companies to keep up with the pace, it does feel like we are constantly talking about newsrooms shrinking.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is the future of media? Just a small question to end the podcast.
I'm so glad that this is a Friday morning. What do I think is the future of media? Well, I do think that the inability to adapt is the biggest issue that is facing legacy publishers. Like that is far and away the biggest issue. I think for us, there is huge opportunity in the fact that so many people are now, as we said, looking at AI, that there is a gap in the market for real high quality news and videos and explainers to really cut through all of that just very computer-esque writing. And I think that's our opportunity, that we're not going to pretend that people our age aren't getting those AI overviews or aren't asking ChatGPT to explain the latest news story. What we need to do is make sure that we continue to add value and that we have a connection with our audience. And the journalists in our newsroom are creators in and of themselves, and they connect with audiences. And at the end of the day, people connect with people. And so as long as we can continue to deliver that high quality and high value work, I think that that ensures us against this sort of rise of AI. The other thing for us is that a lot of newsrooms, bigger newsrooms, have always just relied on advertising, and the Daily Aus relies a lot on advertising.
For our revenue.
For our revenue to bring money in, but that is a huge risk. And we identified very early that that is not the way of the future, that we need to have multiple sources. And that's what we're trying to build out. How do we build a really sustainable news media company, can continue to grow and employ young people as we see all of these other newsrooms shrinking?
I would also point out that when we talk about newsrooms shrinking, we're often talking about traditional newsrooms. And I would actually say that around Australia and also in the US, new media is thriving. There are so many new media companies. And the landscape is diversifying, and audiences are meeting new media companies and leaning towards new media companies, and they are growing.
And the cost of them doing business is so much lower than a huge newsroom. And so we are seeing more and more people break into that field, and, you know, ex-CNN anchors becoming journalists on TikTok. Like that is what's happening. And it's just important that those principles of editorial, you know, integrity and trust are at the cornerstone of all of that.
But I would say, just to end it on a slightly positive note, that I don't think it is all negative. Because I do think that audiences are still extremely interested in journalism and quality journalism.
More than ever.
And they are seeking out fact-checked information. They're just going to different places to get that.
And we hope to be there every step of the way.
Zara, thank you for explaining that
Billi.
On our lovely Friday morning. And thank you for listening to this episode of The Daily Aus. I feel like since we've spoken so much about The Daily Aus, we should ask you to follow if you are not already. If you are listening on Spotify, you can press follow. If you are listening on Apple, you can press follow. Or if you're listening on YouTube, you can click subscribe. That helps us grow and helps independent media companies like us get to new audiences. We'll be back this afternoon with your evening headlines, but until then, we hope you have a lovely day.